COVID-19 Pandemic and the Effects on Global and Domestic Supply Chains by Group M6. A new virus. The COVID-19 virus emerged in late December of 2019 in Wuhan City, a sprawling commercial center which is the capital of central China's Hubei province. This virus quickly spread to other countries in Asia, Europe, and North America, and was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization on March 11, 2020. The World Health Organization reported that by March 30, 2020, there were a total of 740,157 confirmed cases and 35,097 deaths globally. By November 30th of 2020, these numbers skyrocketed to 62,363,527 confirmed cases and 1,456,687 deaths. With over 13 million confirmed cases, the United States has the highest amount of infection rates, followed by India and Brazil, with over 9.4 million and 6.2 million, respectively. Early timeline. Late January, most of China was placed under a lockdown, resulting in a standstill for production. This lockdown successfully stemmed the spread of the virus and was lifted in late March. Mid-March, the virus is found in nearly every country, with Europe being considered the current hotspot, resulting in over 250 million Europeans placed under lockdown. New York State is considered a hotspot for the USA, and a shutdown order of non-essential businesses is issued. Mid-May, most of the remaining lockdowns are gradually lifted as infection rates decline. Many businesses slowly started to reopen at reduced capacity. The maps on this slide illustrate the estimated value added lost if lockdowns are reintroduced. In the first row, 80% strictness for 2 months enacted in China would result in 3.5% loss. If it was enacted in Europe and the United States, it would result in 12.6% loss. If it was enacted globally, it would result in 26.8% loss. The second row illustrates 60% strictness for 4 months. In China only, this would result in 5.3% loss. In Europe and the United States, this would result in 16% loss. And globally, this would result in 26.3% loss. The final row illustrates 60% strictness for 6 months. In China only, this would result in 9% loss. In Europe and the United States, this would result in 22.8% loss. And globally, this would result in 30.8% loss. Global supply chain effects. The top 10 exporters in 2019 were China with $2,500 billion, the U.S. with just over $1,500 billion, Germany with $1,500 billion, the Netherlands with over $500 billion, Japan with just over $500 billion, France and South Korea with $500 billion, Hong Kong with $500 billion, Italy with $500 billion, and Britain with just under $500 billion. Coronavirus infection rates of the top 10 global exporters, as far as we know. China has 93,557 cases. The USA has 13,200,000 234,551 cases. Germany has 1,067,453 cases. Netherlands has 522,825 cases. Japan had 148,694 cases. France had 2,183,275 cases. South Korea had 34,652 cases. Hong Kong with 6,397 cases. Italy with 1,601,554 cases. And finally, Britain with 1,629,661 cases. The COVID crisis created a historic drop in global trade. Trade flows collapsed in the spring. Despite recent signs of a rebound, a reshaping of world trade could follow the pandemic. Even before the coronavirus, global trade had been weakened due to trade tensions and tariffs. China was the first major economy to enter lockdown and the first to leave it, so its exports rose in the second quarter by 2.4%, following a 7.7% drop in the first quarter. Since the US and the Eurozone were in lockdown for much of the second quarter, their exports fell by 24.8% and 19.2%, respectively. Factors affecting the global supply chains during COVID-19. As a result of the lockdowns, the manufacturing of many non-essential goods were either reduced drastically or halted completely. Essential manufacturing processes were also negatively affected since many employees were unable to get to work. Many countries imposed severe restrictions or limitations on goods arriving at their ports. These limitations affected the transportation of goods in the supply chain. Increased demand for specific items such as cleaning and disinfectant products, paper products, and personal protection items such as gloves and face masks overwhelmed manufacturing and distribution channels. Conversely, the lack of demand for non-essential items clogged up distribution networks. Domestic supply chain issues caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Limited transportation modes restricted the ability of manufacturers to ship or distribute many of their products. Stockpiling or hoarding of items led to stockouts of many essential products. This put increased pressure on the supply chain to provide more of these essential goods. Increased inventory costs since many retailers were forced to close and could not receive a delivery of goods. And finally, loss of revenue for the entire supply chain due to decreasing demand or spoilage of perishable goods. Post-pandemic supply chains. Going forward after COVID-19. When the COVID-19 pandemic subsides, the world is going to look markedly different. The supply shock that started in China in February and the demand shock that followed as the global economy shut down exposed vulnerabilities in production, strategies, and supply chains of firms just about everywhere. To avoid the negative circumstances that many found themselves in during this pandemic, firms must examine the vulnerabilities of their supply chains and consider steps that may make their supply chains more resilient in an economic crisis. This can be a tough and time-consuming task, but there are three basic ones that should be performed regularly. Mitigate supply chain vulnerabilities. Diversify the supply base. Relying on just one or two sources for product material can lead to supply disruption or delays. Obtaining multiple suppliers may mitigate the risk of disruption, but it also may increase costs since these suppliers may not achieve economies of scale. Multi-tiered supply networks. Products may consist of numerous parts, which are sourced from many different suppliers. This can lead to vulnerability when you depend on a single supplier deep in your network for a crucial part. A firm should trace the entire supply network and set up alternatives in case they may someday be needed. Re-examine safety inventory levels. Firms should periodically review the level of safety inventory that should be kept on hand to avoid shortage or stockouts. This inventory carries the risk of obsolescence and ties up cash. However, it should be weighted against the cost of a disruption, including lost revenues or higher prices to be paid for materials that may suddenly be in short supply.